Good day, everyone. We are now in the third lecture of our book, The Bible Formation. And this time, we will discuss the second part of the book of Genesis. And it is also the second era of the Old Testament, which is, we call this Patriarchal era. Okay, so from our last lecture, if you can remember, we have already talked about the genealogy of Seth in Genesis chapter 5. And then the last verse there is Noah and his sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So here, if you want to see the genealogy of these people, three people, you can see also from the line of Ham is the line of Canaan, and then the line of Shem, it is the line of, you can see one of the descendants there is Abram. So it is very important today because we are going to talk about the patriarch people, and it starts from Abraham. Okay, so let's read from the book of Genesis chapter 9, verse 25 to 27. He said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." He also said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend Japheth's territory. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be the slave of Japheth." Okay, so why it is like this? So for the context, after the flood and the covenant of God to Noah, then Noah drank from his wine and became drunk and lied naked in his tent. So what happened next? Ham, one of Noah's son, saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers instead of covering. Then Shem and Japheth, they covered their father's nakedness. And after that, their father gave them this prophecy from Genesis chapter 9. Now, in the verse we just read, it shows the curse that was given to Ham's descendant Canaan, right? And then in the line of Shem, we see there the name of Abram, which is one of the important person in the history of Israel. So now we will start our lecture for patriarchal era, and we will talk about the four important persons here. So first is Abraham, second Isaac, third Jacob, and lastly is Joseph. So let's go on with Abraham. As I think you already know who he is. He is the respected father of faith and the chosen people of the chosen people. So he also received a divine promise from God. So if you will read in the book of Genesis chapter 12, it is the start of when God called him. So Abraham's story really turns interesting at the start of Genesis chapter 12. So in the first three verses, we will read like this. The Lord has said to Abram, "Leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So God called Abraham out from his home in Haran and told him to go to a land that he will show to him. Uh, he never knew about this place, but he obeyed God. So God also made three promises to Abraham. So what is the first one? It's the promise of descendants. Second is the promise of land, and the promise of blessing. So these promises form the basis for what we will later be called the Abrahamic covenant. So in the next book, it will be detailed in detail about this covenant. So this time we will just talk about the story. And then God planned to establish his kingdom, and a kingdom has actually three necessary elements that is important. So that is the people, the land, and the sovereignty. So it means that God has promised Abraham these things to be fulfilled in him. So although these promises sounded so good and appealing, the actual situations were really different. Why? Sarah was barren. How can there be a descendant from Abraham? right? So, but Abraham believed in God. He has bridged this gap between the promise and the reality by what? By faith. So after 25 years of waiting, then he got this promise. He was 100 years old when he had his own son, Isaac. But after many years, God asked him to offer his son. Nevertheless, Abraham still obeyed God. So through this, we know that Abraham obeyed God and he became the father of faith. And from him, the seed of faith has been spread to his nation, to his people. And he only witnessed this fulfillment of the promise in the form of his son, Isaac. So now let's look on the story of Isaac, his son. He is the foundation of God's promise, leading a life characterized by obedience. So here is the story of Isaac because it demonstrates God's faithfulness to his promises. He had made a covenant with Abraham, and um, it would continue to uphold it with Isaac and his son Jacob as well. Isaac showed firm obedience to his father, especially, when the story of Isaac was taken by Abraham up to the mountain where Abraham, in obedience to God, prepared him to sacrifice him. Actually, in Genesis chapter 22, you will read this one. And then in here, the Bible gives no indication that Isaac resisted, right? So as Abraham prepared to kill Isaac as an offering, an angel stopped him, and then Abraham saw a ram and offered this ram instead. In this story, we can also know here that God was called Jehovah Jireh because God is the one who provides. He provided a sacrifice lamb that is used by Abraham. And so in here also, we can see that in this analogy, this account that mirrors God giving his only son, Jesus Christ, to be the sacrifice. And God did indeed provide the lamb. Literally, of course, for Abraham and Isaac, then and figuratively for all of the humanity willing to accept the sacrifice of Jesus. So who is Isaac? Isaac is a man of meditation. In Genesis chapter 24, verse 63 and verse 25, chapter 25, verse 21, we can see that Isaac practices regular prayer and meditation. That's why he was called like this. And then second thing, Isaac repeatedly dug wells in Genesis chapter 26. The most immediate purpose was to provide a reliable source of water for his livestock, for the sheep and other animals, and then also for himself. Water is very essential because they are in the dry land where he was living. So why he repeatedly dug wells? Because in the places where he did that, there were many disputes over the place, over the wells, who owns this, who owns that. So he persistently dug new wells. That's why he did it. And then next person in our patriarch era is Jacob. He is enduring faith in pursuit of survival and success. So we know Jacob is the son of Isaac. He was actually renamed as Israel, as a patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. So even though he has this identity, his life was actually not easy and it was not very comfortable because in the story of Jacob, even in his life, when it has begun, there are struggles. So as a twin in the womb from his mother with Esau, we know this, he actually fought for position and was born grasping his brother's heel. That's why his name, we can find in Genesis 25, verse 26, Jacob's name is translated to as he deceives. And then, while growing up together, Esau became a very fine hunter and he was loved by his father Jacob. He was favored by Jacob, while by Isaac. I'm sorry, by Isaac. And then Jacob was just content to stay at home among the tents. And then uh, he is the favorite of his mother. We can see in this way. And then when Isaac was old and his eyesight faded, he thought that he was near to his death, and then made an arrangement with Esau to pass on to him the blessings due to the firstborn son. In Genesis chapter 27, we can read this one. And then in hearing this, Rebekah devised a plan to deceive Isaac into blessing Jacob instead. Uh, so what happened? The blessing for the firstborn was given to Jacob. He received that from his father. Then and then Esau was very angry at him and wanted to kill him. So fearing his brother's wrath, he seek refuge at his uncle's place. During his journey going there, he had a dream of a ladder to heaven with God at the top, and then angels ascending and descending. So actually, God gave Jacob the assurance of his presence and reiterated his promise to Abraham. As a result of this experience, Jacob renamed the place Bethel, meaning house of God, and he vowed to serve God. So he understood here that the true blessing is more than a material prosperity, and it actually lies in an intimate connection with God. And lastly, for our patriarch era is Joseph. He is called the righteous leader, leading Israel to Egypt's crucible for greatness. So, Joseph is actually the 11th son of Jacob. The last is Benjamin. And he was granted the birthright despite his position in the family lineage. So, in his early life, it was also not very easy. First, he was favored greatly by his father since he is the first son from Jacob's beloved wife Rachel. And then Joseph was his father loved him so much more than any other more than any of his brothers, and gave him a colored cloak. So his brother were very jealous of him and sold him into slavery. Imagine this. Then he was taken to Egypt and eventually became steward to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. And then we know the story. He interpreted the Pharaoh's dream, and also he remained faithful to God and eventually ascended to that position of prime minister through divine intervention. So, recognizing the divine purpose behind his journey to Egypt, Joseph made the conscious decision to forgive his brothers and extend his protection to them in Egypt. So, ensuring their well being and prosperity, he foresaw a future return to promised land and laid the groundwork for his family eventual restoration. So, we know this in Genesis chapter 50. He brought all his people, all the sons of his father into Egypt and lived there. And we can see here that there are parallels between Joseph and Jesus. First, they both face betrayal by siblings. Jesus also was rejected by his own people. Second, he endured being cast into a cistern, and actually this is symbolized similar to a grave. Next, Joseph was sold for a sum of silver, suggestive of the 30 pieces paid for Jesus. He triumphed over temptation despite adversity. We know this also, Jesus has overcome temptation. And then recognize suffering as part of God's divine plan. Ultimately exalted by God for their faithfulness and obedience. Joseph became the prime minister, and Jesus also, he rose again, he resurrected and ascended into heaven. So when we collect the details of Joseph's life, we see a glorious reflection that closely mirrors another life of Jesus we are so intimately familiar with. So this is not because Joseph was Jesus' favorite Bible hero he wanted to emulate. It is because God is sovereign and he has been laying the tracks for the glory of Christ throughout the redemptive history. So now, despite the passage of time and seemingly discrepancy between promise and reality, the patriarchs demonstrated firm faith. Their faith, their trust in God. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 9 says, by faith, he made his home. It was Abraham. Abraham made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. So, through their faith, the patriarchs endured hardships, faced uncertainties, and remained steadfast in their belief that God will ultimately fulfill his promises. Then finally, their journey serves as a testament to the power of faith to sustain and guide believers through the complexities of life, and ultimately leading the fulfillment of God's divine plan in his perfect timing, and fulfilled it in Jesus Christ. So this is the third chapter of our book, Bible Formation.